Hello, eighth graders. So we are starting our human impact unit. So what impact have humans had on our planet? Now, we are going to focus in primarily on the negatives for the time being, which is the overview, the things that we have done since basically the Industrial Revolution really hasn't helped what we've done. But we are going to go over all of that. And then by the time we get to solutions, we'll talk about some of the things that we really have started to do that are amazing. But it doesn't just stop there. So let's get going. We are working with 3 of our 4 standards right now. So 3-1, 3-3, and 3-4. Basically what it comes down to, you can take your time to read all of these if you'd like, but you are going to be able to identify how humans are impacting our natural environment at this point in time. That's about it right now. We're just going to talk a little bit about everything, and then we'll get to the rest, okay? Make sure you have your whole group notes out in front of you, just because this is how we're going to start every day, is with our whole group. We're going to talk about the main meat and potatoes of what we need to know, and then we will get to like the little things and how they all connect and things like that. So yes. So I'm trying to learn from my mistakes. So this does not have the actual video on it because for whatever reason, when I record over it, it then doesn't want to play. So what I have done is attached to this PowerPoint slide, there is the hyperlink. You can click on that. If you go into Schoology, whether it is just the whole group or whether it's the PowerPoint folder, there's a link right there for you. Now, yes, this is 10.5 minutes. But it's very thorough in what you need to know or what the topics are that we are going to cover. So it takes a little bit longer than I typically like for whole group, but this is where we're kind of at because you need to understand all of the different impacts that we have on the environment. And yes, this focuses in on like the ecology of it, but we're going to talk about not only the ecology, but how ecosystems have completely changed, how humans now have started to change due to all of this stuff. So please, please, please watch this. There are questions relating to it on your whole group sheet. So right now would be a great time to like stop G and then go to the links, or keep going and come back to this. It's kind of whatever, okay? So one of the major things that we talk about is just all of the like minor areas that we are impacting. So here are the topics that we're going to be focusing in on. And if you're looking at your choice board, you're already aware of these. But the ways the earth is affected because of the activity that we do has hurt it. So like this cartoon seems silly, but it's legitimately how we're kind of sort of treating our planet. So the different areas of human impact that we're going to focus in on include fossil fuel usage and our carbon footprint. Deforestation, pollution, both in the air, the water, and then we touch a little bit on the land, and overpopulation. Now, by no means is this like an excuse to like have some sort of like purge or anything like that. But there are ways that where our population is currently at, we can kind of sort of counteract it with like supporting our planet, and things like that. So please don't get me wrong when I say overpopulation. But yeah, so those are the topics we're going to focus in on. Now is the end of whole group. Okay, so that 10-minute video, a little bit of me chatting, and now it's time for you to work. Obviously, if you're doing this at home, some of these chance expectations don't necessarily work for you, but when it comes to how we are doing it in class, they do matter. So please keep in mind that if you are on the PowerPoint folder, then we will continue on. And if you're in the whole group folder, then have fun with the rest of your learning, and I will talk to you guys soon. Okay, PowerPoint, stay with me. So, fossil fuels. When we're talking fossil fuels, we are talking oil and gas and like those non-renewable gases. So why is this such a big deal? Well, because fossil fuels increase the amount of greenhouse gases that we emit into our atmosphere. That is the number one cause of global warming. Okay, so that more greenhouse gases increase the temperature. Okay, now, yes, we're sitting here currently when I'm recording this, it is April, I don't even know, because we're in a Blizzard-geddon whatever, April 4th, 2023. I don't know if I'm going to use this again next year or not, but we're currently sitting here, April. We just barely broke 40 the other day, and now we're expected to get dumped on with 24 inches of snow. So I usually get a lot of the questions of, well, how is the how's the temperature rising if we're getting all this snow? This is just one of the effects. It may not be rising up here yet. Where this normally starts to affect is at the poles and at the equator. Okay, so at the equator, it's much, much warmer than it typically is. At the poles, it's much warmer than it typically is. Now, when we're talking much, much warmer, we're talking maybe 0.4 of a degree, but that can impact the difference between freezing and melting. So that's where we start getting the polar ice caps starting to melt and things like that. So no, we're in a really weird zone that is kind of sandwiched between these two issues, to where we are seeing typical weather, but we're also starting to see atypical weather. We shouldn't be getting 24 inches of snow the first week of April. That's not normal. Okay, we normally get we get like second or third winter, because we would have had a fake spring by now. Things like that. So that's typical. 24, not so much. Why is that? Okay, sorry, Will's still sleeping, so I'm making sure that he's still sleeping. So that water temperatures contribute to increase in flooding and intense weather changes. So as we warm up the water around the equator and as we start melting the water from the poles that are in ice caps, we now have significant flooding around our coastal lines. So we talk that like, oh, if the polar ice caps were to completely melt, we wouldn't have Florida, we wouldn't have California anymore, like things like that, because that water has to go somewhere and it goes on land. So that, and then we get those weird weather changes. That's where we get these massive storms in April, is because it's all fueled by humidity. And we'll talk more of that once we get into meteorology. But yeah, so then we get these, like, we get an increase in hurricanes and typhoons and things like that, depending on what hemisphere you're on. It's not great. And then because of this, it then can start causing agricultural problems. So agricultural would be our farms. We have noticed that sometimes farmers can't get their crop in the ground before they typically would, which means like the whole adage of like knee high by 4th of July for our corn, it's not there. So then that starts increasing the need for food, and we're not able to provide it. So that's just one way how fossil fuels can start kind of like everything. We'll learn more about it during our fossil fuels mini unit if you choose that topic. Air pollution. No one has an option. We have to learn about air pollution just because it is significant. So air pollution, the burning of fossil fuels causes many pollutants to be released into the air. Okay, we're aware of this. Typically, this is happening with, typically this is happening with major, like industries, things like that, releasing the significant amount of pollutants. But you're doing it as well. I'm just as guilty of it. I don't like getting into a cold car, so I run my car when I quick run Will into preschool and then hop back into it. I'm in there for less than 5 minutes typically, and I don't want a cold car, so I keep it running. Those are the little things that just contribute to this. Why do we care? Well, air pollution, it has a big issue on human health. I personally suffer from a heart murmur. So on high pollutant air days, I'm not really supposed to leave my house just because it puts more strain on my heart. People with asthma can't leave their house. I have some learners who it's very important for them to keep up with the air quality index so that they know whether they should or shouldn't leave, and if so, do they need their inhaler and all this kind of stuff. So it has harmful effects on people. Little ones shouldn't be out in those days. So that particulate matter. There are bigger things than what should be in our air. Now, by bigger, I don't necessarily mean by like you can see it, but rather it's big enough to clog up your alveoli in your lungs. And as you learned last year in 7th grade, they're really, really small. But that's how you get gas exchange between oxygen and carbon dioxide to keep your body running. So that smog, that's disgusting. So when we have these foggy mornings coming up in the spring, it's not just condensed water hanging out really down below, but it's condensed water and like disgusting ash and particulates and things like that. Not good. And then finally, acid precipitation. We don't see a lot of this out here because we don't have enough of big industries throwing up a bunch of like chemicals into our atmosphere, but in larger cities we do. Acid precipitation is legitimately acid falling as rain. Now, no, if you step outside, the likelihood of it like melting your skin, not so much, but if it sits and lingers long enough, it can. So, not good. Honestly, that's like the worst way to die, I feel. So, yeah, let's fix this. Water pollution. We have a very limited amount of fresh water on our planet. If you think about it, fresh water is really only found underground and in like our lakes and rivers. So polluting what little fresh water we do have limits the amount of water that we can intake. And again, water is important for human homeostasis. So that, plus then on top of that, like you're destroying habitats. The little fishies have nowhere to live. Things like that. Then when we go and we pollute our seawater, again, habitat destruction. Coral reefs are going away. All of those interesting underwater ecosystems are disappearing. But then also the health issue in many of the organisms, it then starts to, again, impact humans. There are certain times where you can't find certain fish on the supermarket shelves because they contain too much mercury or too much of other things that once we ingest it, it's now in our body. So that's not good. So water pollution, like, again, comes back on us. Deforestation. So deforestation is essentially taking down large amounts of trees and forests in order to use it for things like resources. So we do need wood for construction and things like that, for places to put homes, and then for farmland. Farmland is usually the biggest reason. So that many organisms rely on these habitats that are now being destroyed. And without these habitats, the organisms are then forced to live in places that they wouldn't normally, to where now, like, I technically built my house in an old farm field. I still have deer that hang out over here. They come up and eat my trees, which makes me a little sad, but also like, oh, well, this is like how it's supposed to be. So that I have giant jackrabbits like having fights out in my front yard. I have a funny video of it. But like they're essentially fighting for territory that I took. So things like that. This is where you start seeing, we have those, what were they? Not mountain lions. Were they mountain lions? I don't know. But the big old cats that like put Freedom Elementary into a lockdown a couple of years ago because it was within city limits. I used to live over by Rendezvous Park, and we would constantly get little updates of like, don't leave your house because you have fox or you have coyotes, or again, these mountain lion big old cats just roaming about. So things you wouldn't think of living in North Dakota, but it's real because we've taken their homes by putting up our homes. So not great. And then non-renewable resources. So we have to understand that there are certain things on this planet that once they're gone, they're gone. Because they either were established with the Big Bang and that was it, or it takes millions of years for it to be created. Fossil fuels are one of those things. Our fossil fuels that we're using, remember, dates back all the way to the Carboniferous era. So that, and then we're consuming them much, much faster. And that's because of the following: overpopulation. There's just so many of us that we're just using what our planet has at a much quicker rate than what it's able to either A, replenish, or B, had in the first place. So we are now getting to the point where we are living on top of each other. Now, I don't literally mean like someone's living on top of your head. No, but like think of the amount of apartment complexes that have had to go up. Think of skyscrapers, because we didn't have any more space down here, we had to come up here. Things like that. That's not how the world was intended. But like I said earlier, we can start doing things to help support it and still keep up. I mean, not keep up, but and steady the rate of population. Okay? So we'll talk about all that. This is so much fun just to kind of talk about like, oh, we kind of suck. But yeah, so make sure that you get your notes and everything done and exit tickets. I believe there's an exit ticket. And yeah, awesome. Let me know if there's anything you need help with, or if there's something where you're like, gee, I don't know what tangent you just went on. But yeah, awesome. Thanks.